The morning had started off like any other, with that dull rhythm that lulls you into thinking everything is just normal. A sip of coffee, the click of heels on cold tiles, the soft hum of the elevator waiting for me. I had no idea what was waiting for me on the other side of that button. I stepped into the elevator, pushing the button for my floor without giving it much thought. My body felt heavy today, a product of a sleepless night spent tossing and turning, my mind racing with worries and doubts. I felt out of place in my own skin. I could feel the weight of exhaustion creeping through my veins, making everything feel sluggish, as though I was moving in slow motion. The elevator doors closed with a soft whoosh, and I closed my eyes for just a second, letting the stillness wash over me. I wasn't expecting anything, not really. Just a routine, like every other day. But then the doors opened again. And there he was. He stepped in as if he owned the space, tall, with broad shoulders that seemed to fill the entire elevator. I couldn't help but notice the way he moved, calm, controlled, deliberate. His eyes met mine for a brief moment, and I felt an immediate jolt, like electricity running through my spine. There was something in his gaze that unsettled me. He wasn't just looking at me. No, it was more like he was studying me, like he already knew more about me than I was comfortable with. I shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his gaze, but I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I hated how easily he had caught me off guard. Why did I feel so exposed? The elevator jerked suddenly, breaking my train of thought. I grabbed the rail beside me, my pulse spiking. The light flickered for a second, and the air felt thick, charged. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my voice came out a little breathier than I intended. The man didn't respond right away. Instead, his eyes stayed on me, his face unreadable, almost as if he was waiting for something. The elevator stalled, and my stomach did a flip. The gentle hum of the machinery had stopped, leaving a deafening silence. It was as if the air had thickened with tension, and I could feel the change, the shift. Something about this was different, about him, about the situation. "Looks like we're stuck," he said, his voice low, calm, and smooth, with a hint of amusement that didn't sit well with me. There was something in his tone that made me wary, but I couldn't place it. It wasn't quite mocking, but it was certainly too knowing. I swallowed, suddenly feeling the space between us closing in. I took a step back, pressing my back to the cold wall, trying to distance myself from whatever strange energy hung between us. But he wasn't moving. He stood there, still as ever, as if he were completely at ease in the confined space. I tried to focus on something, anything other than the way he was looking at me. My breath felt shallow, like it couldn't find its way past my chest. I noticed his hands, large, strong, the fingers slightly curled, almost as if he was holding back something. My gaze drifted down involuntarily, and I caught myself staring at his hand resting just inches from mine. I snapped my eyes back up to his face, my heartbeat picking up speed. He hadn't moved, hadn't said anything, but the tension in the air was almost palpable. His eyes had never left me. "Are you okay?" he asked again, but this time his voice was closer, his words brushed against my ear, though he hadn't moved any closer. The proximity felt intimate in a way I wasn't prepared for. I tried to step back, but the wall behind me stopped me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. There was something in the way he was looking at me, like he was studying my every reaction, every movement. His presence in that small, dimly lit elevator seemed to fill every inch of space, closing in on me, and it made the room feel unbearably hot. I swallowed, forcing myself to speak. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice wavered. I hated how weak I sounded, how exposed I felt under his gaze. The elevator lurched again, the lights flickering once more, but this time it didn't start moving. The silence stretched on. I couldn't take my eyes off him, nor could I bring myself to say anything else. My mind raced with questions, with doubts. Why was I so affected by this? It was just a stranger. Just a guy in an elevator. But the way he looked at me made it feel different. And then, in the stillness of the elevator, something shifted. He stepped closer, just a step, but it was enough to make my breath catch in my throat. I didn't have time to react before his hand reached out, brushing lightly against mine. The simple contact sent a jolt of heat rushing through me. It wasn't a deliberate touch. It wasn't rough or forceful. It was light, almost accidental, but it felt far too intimate for something so casual. I felt my pulse spike as his fingers lingered, just barely brushing against mine, and I instinctively pulled my hand back. But the space between us felt charged, like static in the air. I couldn't ignore the heat crawling under my skin, the way my body was reacting to him, even though my mind was screaming at me to step away. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked again, but this time his tone was softer, almost coaxing. I nodded, but I could feel my body betraying me. My breath was shallow, my heart racing, my hands trembling. I wanted to break the silence, to make it stop, but all I could do was stand there, trapped in the small, suffocating space with him. The elevator had stopped again, but I wasn't sure I wanted it to start moving anytime soon. Because as much as I told myself I should push away from him, the way he was looking at me made me wonder, what was he going to do next? I couldn't breathe. Every inch of my body screamed at me to do something, anything, to break free from this strange, suffocating tension between us. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't move. My thoughts were clouded, my body betraying me, reacting to him in ways I couldn't control. The seconds felt like hours. The soft hum of the elevator was replaced by the erratic beat of my heart, echoing loudly in my ears. I shifted uneasily, trying to distance myself from him, but it was impossible. The space between us felt electric, as though every movement, every breath we took, was synchronized in some strange, unspoken dance. He wasn't saying anything, just standing there, his presence looming over me, calm and still. But the way he looked at me, his dark eyes fixed on mine, made me feel like I was being drawn closer to him against my will. I tried to look away, to focus on something, anything else, but it was like his gaze was magnetic, pulling me in. Still not moving, I muttered, my voice shaky. It was the only thing I could think to say, but even as the words left my mouth, they felt hollow. I wasn't concerned about the elevator anymore. I wasn't concerned about being late to work or the meeting I had scheduled. All I could think about was how he made me feel, how everything inside me seemed to tighten when he was near. He didn't respond, but there was a slight twitch in his lips, as though he were amused by my discomfort. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, heavy with expectation. And then, without warning, he stepped closer. So close that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His breath, slow and steady, brushed against my cheek, and I froze, the world around me becoming a blur. What do you want?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. I had no idea where this boldness was coming from. I should have been terrified, but for some reason, there was an undeniable curiosity creeping into my chest. A deep, primal part of me wanted to understand why I felt this way, why my body was betraying me in the worst possible way. His hand reached out, fingers gently brushing the side of my face. It was the slightest of touches, but it sent a shiver down my spine, igniting something inside me. I wanted to pull away. I should have pulled away. But the way his touch lingered made me hesitate. I was caught in a web of tension, not just physical, but psychological. His gaze never wavered, and I couldn't look away, couldn't break free. "Relax," he murmured softly. His voice was so close now, almost a whisper, but every word felt like it was directed deep inside me. "You're safe here." Safe. Those words shouldn't have been comforting. But with him standing so close, his warmth invading my personal space, they almost sounded like a promise. I couldn't make sense of it. This wasn't safety. This was something else. This was dangerous. The air felt charged, like the space between us had collapsed into a silent, suffocating bubble. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to think, to make sense of what was happening. What was he trying to do? What did he want from me? Before I could stop myself, I felt my lips part slightly, my breath catching in my throat. The words I wanted to say, the questions I wanted to ask, all vanished as if they never existed. He didn't need to speak. He didn't need to make any more moves. His presence alone was enough to make me forget everything I thought I knew. And then, just like that, the elevator jerked again. A sudden motion. It felt like I was falling, and before I could react, his arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer to him. My body collided with his chest, and the world around us seemed to tilt. For a moment, everything went silent. The only thing I could hear was the rapid beat of my heart, matching his own. His body was solid, unyielding, and I felt the intensity of his presence like a physical weight pressing against me. I wanted to pull away, but I couldn't. I felt him lean down, his breath ghosting against my ear. "Are you sure you want to be here?" he asked, his voice low, almost dangerous. I could feel his lips brush against my earlobe, and something inside me snapped. I didn't know what it was, whether it was fear or desire, or maybe both, but I felt the pull between us intensify. His hands moved, slowly, deliberately, down my side, tracing the curve of my waist. I could barely breathe, my chest tightening with each movement, each inch of space closing between us. I should have stopped this. I should have pushed him away, pressed the emergency button, screamed for help. But I didn't. I didn't know why I didn't. Something deep inside me told me to stay still, to let it unfold, to see where this moment would take me. My body was betraying me, betraying my mind, and I couldn't stop it. His lips finally met mine. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like he was testing the waters. But then it deepened, and I felt a rush of heat spread through my body. My pulse quickened, and my mind, still clouded, still unable to make sense of anything, finally surrendered. When he pulled away, I was left breathless, my chest heaving with confusion and something else I couldn't quite name. He was still close, too close, and I could feel the heat of his body, feel the tension in the air like it was never going to go away. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. There were no questions, no demands. Just a thick, oppressive silence that weighed on my shoulders. The elevator started moving again, but the world around me felt like it had changed in an instant. I didn't know what had just happened. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to the way things were before. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to.